Welcome to Testimony Mountain. It's my joy to be here again with Veronica. We've missed you, Veronica, for a while, but we're glad you're back and so appreciate what you do, the research that you bring, and all of that. So, I don't know if you want to catch us up, how you're doing, and if you want to share anything about your break or not.
Yeah.
And we'll see where the Lord
Uh,
leads us.
yeah, I took a break for the first time in 4 years. I've been kind of writing and researching steadily since October of 2020, and I just kind of hit a wall, and I thought I need to take a break, and a whole bunch of things had happened, so it was a good time to step away or try to step away. I really have a hard time taking a break, so I did a lot of like looking but not commenting when I sat down or had 10 minutes to say I didn't want to feel like I was completely out of the loop. But yeah, and then I kind of got back into it in December because I had to do a lot of sitting and I had a lot of ideas. So I kind of got a good 2 month break and then sort of a month of not posting, which was nice because I got ahead of myself a little bit. It's always nice to be ahead of the game
Definitely.
when you're writing. I can edit it before I post it, kind of a deal. And
Yes.
people don't complain about, well, nobody really complains about anything. You guys are great. It's a certain individuals who think I ought to have everything perfectly spelled, etc. Like you can't do the volume of writing that I do and have anything be perfect. Anyway, so yeah, so it was good. I got a lot of rest done. We got a lot of odd. I had a whole bunch of plans and none of them got accomplished, but a whole bunch of other things got accomplished. So I
Yes.
I never know. It's like life. So it was good, but I'm glad to be back and a lot of good ideas and new posts and hopefully people find them useful. And hopefully you can understand what I'm saying. I've still got this rotten cold from the end of December. It's lingering on.
Oh. No, so appreciate you being on. And the last blog that I saw on the Sleeping Beauty, that was really helpful and including the prayers in there and all of that. So I'm grateful for what you do. And I believe it helps survivors when we have a lot of questions and things come up. And
I hope so. I think it does, trigger a lot of it. It helps it just for, not being in the system. Helps make sense of why we see the same images over and over and over and over and over, and the same videos, the same movies being made, every decade to make the same movie again and again and again. And understanding that they use these for programming purposes just kind of makes it all make sense. I can't imagine it's easy to heal from it, but I was really appreciative that that kind of blueprint was put out, even if you don't use the whole thing. It's great to have somewhere to start, a prayer to start with, something to begin with, somewhere to, like anchor if you're trying to figure out what to do. Having no blueprint at all has got to be difficult. So,
it is. And sometimes we feel like, it's so crazy. Am I making this up? And so having outside confirmation can be really helpful. And I know during your break, I emailed you a question that was coming up in my system, and I'd asked someone else, hadn't gotten back to me, and there's something about when there is a piece of confirmation that just kind of settles in. Okay, I'm not crazy. This is real, um,
right.
and able to move forward. So I'm grateful for that.
Good, good. Glad to be able to help in the small, it feels small, but I never know how it goes out into the universe. Hopefully it ripples out and has positive effects.
It does. And talking about all those images and so on, my housemates and I just watched, I only watched the first half because I had other things I had to do. They watched the rest of it. But I don't recommend this, but it's a documentary on YouTube called Finding Joe. And if you ever want to see something full of system and images, that's it.
Mm,
And,
mm,
this whole hero's journey and all of that, which there's some things that are true, but it's more this is the hero's journey that they portray is this slightly off, twisted counterfeit, I believe. But they kept showing different pieces of all different kinds of movies and different symbolism, and it was crazy watching it.
One of the posts that I have coming up is about the what is being called the sovereign military.
Mm.
What Jesse Boder has talked about quite a lot, but I haven't been able to really um, figure it out in my head. But that sounds a lot like what she has described as the journey of the knights. So there are
Mhm.
knights and kings,
Yeah.
apparently, and the knights go through she said what the terminology she uses is that the knights have their tale, right? They
Mhm.
have their story, they have their myth. They go to the oracles divine their, you know, kind of Arthurian style growing up where they have benchmarks and magic they have to learn and things that they do during their life as a, a military knight member of this hidden brotherhood military. Um, so yeah, I can imagine it's just from the beginnings of what I looked into that for a post that's coming out in February. So
Mhm.
that post will come out in February, the introduction to that. I can't even imagine the ripples from that when you think all the
Yes.
fairy tales and
Yep.
the supposed myths and the supposed, even back to like the Odyssey or the Iliad or the Greek tragedy sort of things. You wonder how much of that, like, it's astonishing to me how much of our popular life and literature and things that they say are myths are not myths. They're just not for us, they're for them. So they're a myth for us and they're reality for the people inside the system. It's truly, truly astonishing when you start to think of all the things. I read a post a while ago on books in the system, and they only highlighted four,
Mhm.
but the number of books that they use, the number of movies that are used,
Yes.
the story number of stories that are used, all the Grimm's fairy tales, you start to get a picture of how big it is and how widespread it is and how we have been lied to. Whew, it's just
Yeah.
it still blows my mind. It's just for over 4 years. Let's see. Tomorrow's the end of four-year anniversary of the actual blog and publication. So from the 9th of January 2021 till the 9th of January 2025. So we're recording this in advance. So you won't
Yes.
hear this for a little while, but even 4 years of looking into this virtually every day, there's so much there, so much to learn. It's vast.
It is. And what was interesting about this documentary called Finding Joe, it was about Joseph Campbell, who developed that hero's journey,
Mhm.
which even the symbolism of it, is again like the snake eating its tail type of, symbolism. And his initials JC, like Jesus
Yeah.
Christ, there's a lot of false, things in
Mhm.
there. But in the documentary, they use children dressed up as knights and different things like
Yeah.
this. And one point where the child is actually killed and they show the sword with the blood on it and the child falling over it. And it's like, this is just
Yeah.
like in plain sight system
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah.
but part of the reason
Wow.
that we were watching it together was several of the housemates that I'm living with in our systems have come up things having to do with, depending on how you pronounce it, tarot or tarot cards. And I
Mm.
understand, I believe from Wendy Hansen that that is very foundational in a lot of the programming is tarot cards, the Kabbalah tree, uh,
Mm.
and often the Hebrew letters, and those are often significant in that beginning. Now, for me, I didn't have any memories of any of this, and my friend was talking about her own journey and some memories that were surfacing, and she began to talk about the tarot cards, and I don't know anything about it, and she was talking about their numerical value and that hers were lower value and so on. And she talked about how there was one that the person that was mentoring her in that she was before she was a Christian, and that she said they could explore all of the tarot cards, the archetypes within them, and all of that, except for the star card, and that was really special, and you had to be at a certain level to do that. And we're just driving in the car, and she's telling me all this, and what comes up in my spirit is, I'm a star.
Oh, wow.
And so then she kept talking, and then when she finished, I kind of like, I probably not, I don't know anything about this, and she was
Mhm.
like, oh no, when you said that, she had a part come up that said, of course she is, she has blonde hair.
Oh,
And we're like, oh. And then when I was journaling about it, because part of my uh, trafficking was with presidential level things, a part of me was like, yeah, the presidents only deal with stars, and so we're like, oh my goodness,
wow.
we've got this whole new thing where, and then of all things, we were looking and talking about the number 17 because it was coming up a number of us and the different meanings and symbology of it, and discovered that the star card is number 17.
Wow.
And so it's all these
Interesting.
little threads, kind of connecting together. And so I don't know,
Uh,
but
Star card 17. There's so much stuff going on with the 17, the number 17, just in public,
mhm,
and the number of people who are duped into thinking that the Q
mhm,
group or individual, I don't know. I don't know if they think it's a group or individuals. From my understanding, it's a group. The Q
yeah,
group, good group, um, when it's actually a brotherhood group,
yeah,
and the Q plus that they're trying to ascribe to President Trump or whoever is the United States president probably isn't. It's probably top level hidden brotherhood member.
yeah,
Um, but they do. They like to use numbers to cover up or connect many things together. So whether that's tarot cards or the Anon groups or um, the Order of Quetzalcoatl, which is also a Q group.
mhm.
I can't imagine there's a ton that connect to that. Tell me how that works, because I don't understand. When you say, your house, your flatmate had a part come up that said that reminded her of something. So how does
Mhm.
that work? Say you're speaking with someone and you don't know that they're multiple, and you don't know what does that look like? Does it do they have to tell you, oh, a part came up, or does that can you see that? Um, like could I
Usually,
if I was observant, could I see that?
most switching, or you probably wouldn't notice. They want to keep it hidden. They
Oh,
don't want
okay.
us to know that there's a lot of switching. And it depends on, the spectrum as they program you either low functioning and having a lot of mental health issues so that if you reveal anything, they can just say, she's crazy, you know,
Mm-hmm.
or they program high functioning, which actually is a whole lot more programming and torture, and they want you to look functional. So if anything does surface, they can say, "How could that be? How could you be crazy? How could I be multiple?" Uh,
Right.
and it's just part of their deception and their polarization of what they do. And that
Mm-hmm.
helped me to understand because for a long time it was like I don't fit into the typical you
Mm-hmm.
know, DID profile.
Right.
You go on the computer and there's a whole list of things, and most of those I couldn't check off.
Right.
And so then it's hard to believe. But when you understand this other side of the programming, and it's so that programmed people can fit into all levels of society, and you don't know. You don't see switching or no switching is happening when it is.
Mm.
Uh,
That's
on the
what I was reading Fiona Barnett's book, parts of it.
Mhm.
Um, One of the things I'm doing is this year, not to, I feel like I'm going a lot of different directions. I'm sorry. I
No,
don't
it's
mean to be
fine.
scatterbrained, but it's taking my head in a different place. But one of the
Mhm.
things I'm doing this year is writing kind of less intense posts for the public, and I'm publishing them on my Substack on Wednesdays. And then, I've got the more intense kind of posts on the blog behind the paywall. But one of the things I'm doing is I started pulling out all of the perpetrators for certain high profile individuals who have been abused in the system. Because Annika Lucas just came out with a video. She talked with Bet David. I forget his first name, Patrick, I think. Bet
Mhm.
David on his podcast, and he kind of forced her into naming some of her perpetrators. She didn't want to do it. They had kind of an argument about this, which I thought was that's a whole other subject. But anyway, she did come out and say that she had been abused by Pierre Trudeau and a couple of other people. Um, Under duress, I would say. I don't
Yeah.
think she wanted to say that.
Mhm.
So I thought, this is interesting. These perpetrators cross among a lot of different high-profile survivors. So I'm curious because I don't know who's been abused by whom. Now, this is not something that I have a deep and desire or longing to know, but I really feel like it's a useful thing to look up and kind of lay out and see how does this network work? Because a lot of these names come up over and over again. Michael Aquino comes up over and over again. Some of the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers come up over and over and over again. The Trudeau family comes up over and over again. So, I pulled the names. I've pulled the names from a number of different people, and in doing that, I did Fiona Barnett. And one of the things I ran across in doing that project, so that's a kind of an aside, was her saying in some part of her book that she didn't fit into the profile of a typical multiple either. And
Mhm.
how she experienced switching was a shift in emotions. So she was um, not, you know, I guess her particular system wasn't fragmented to the point where she didn't understand what one part or another had been through, which is why her book is really useful because most people can't remember what they've been through, but she can, so she could write it down. But that it was just like a shift from an anger state to a sad state to a happy state. So I thought that was really interesting and useful and worth bringing up because you're right. You look up DID online and you get a set of symptoms that don't fit
Mhm.
a lot of people. And I think a lot of people become confused by that.
Yes.
And they think, well, I don't fit into any of this, therefore this can't be me, or this can't be, I'm looking at it for, a friend or a family member or somebody else or someone online or someone like, Allie Carter. You see her go through many different emotional states in her videos and think, well, this doesn't fit with anything, but I think it's much more widely. So my circular point here, I think there's a lot of presentations that comes through. That's why I was curious. Um,
Definitely. And the more and more we walk out the healing journey, and the more and more we get to understand what's going on inside and to listen to our parts, because a lot of it's been so suppressed. But even in common language, we go, a part of me wants to do this and a part of me
yeah,
wants to do that, you know.
yeah,
And so we can feel that internal conflict on a lot of different topics. And so I believe one of the things where you can tell is people who have a hard time making a decision, it's often because different programmed parts are wanting different things to happen. And that can happen. I mean, people can have a hard time making decisions for other reasons too. But
yeah,
that is one area that is there as well. Um, for me, part of it is learning to listen to what's the first thing that I call bubbles up. That's not a cognitive thought, because so much of our world we've focused on more logical reason, cognitive, mostly our left side of our brain, and really not in touch with uh, our body or parts of us, or you know listening to God.
yeah,
The process of listening to God is similar to listening to our parts, in that what is the first thing that bubbles up, and how we tell the difference between God and a part is how it feels, the fruit of it, and a lot of other things that I share in a teaching on hearing God's voice. Um, but I can feel those different voices in my journaling. That's the easiest place for me to kind of be more in touch, because I'm more focused in on what's going on inside. But, I am my presenter portion, I is more sweet and calm and cheery and all of that. And so when I have something that pops in that's like, I hate you, or is
yeah,
snarky and sarcastic, I know that's a part of me because it's not my normal. And, similar to what Fiona said, like a sudden burst of anger or sadness, then I can go, this has nothing to do with my life right now, why I'd be angry. So, let me check what's going on inside. So I don't know if that
Mm.
helps explain it.
It does. It does. I think it's a confusing thing to encounter. Uh, I've got a background in trauma, so I understand a little bit, but it's also, you read through, I think, boy, I have compassion for people who read through things who don't have any trauma in their background at all because they're one further step removed from really understanding what's going on. And I think it's a barrier to comprehension for the general public. And I'm really, really interested in figuring out at this point how to loop in the general public because I
Mhm,
feel like it's almost critical to survival as a species. If we can't figure out how to wake up and clue in the general public, I don't think, I don't know. I don't see a great big path forward. It's not something that most people want to learn about. But then
mhm,
there's the hurdles of trying to understand such a complex system. Even back to the Q thing, like, so the general public has been convinced that Q is a good thing.
mhm,
And, I understand because I've looped into a lot of different survivor information that Q is a group of high-level witches.
mhm,
These are people who are high, from what I understand, they're an anonymous group. Um, they're going to be composed of dark and light side members of the system, and they are manipulating the public. They are trying to manipulate. Well, I think for one thing, they're trying to suck away the time and energy of a lot of people. They put out all this cryptic information, and I think they get a lot of joy out of watching a lot of people spend a lot of time trying to decode it, when it
mhm.
may not actually mean very much at all. We don't really know. Um, so just and I think it's been so ingrained in kind of the national psyche. People who follow Q are bad,
Mhm.
and people who, they're horrible people, and the Q group behind the scenes, I think is just laughing their butts off.
Yep.
We're like, they're like, woohoo, we can manipulate them. We can make them believe whatever we want to make them believe. And it's sad. To me, it's really sad. So trying to figure out how to breach the barrier of comprehension to the public it's an enormous hurdle that I probably shouldn't even be taking on at all, but I do think about it an awful lot. And
Yeah.
so trying to make any of these bits and pieces more sense to the general public is part of what I'm hoping to do going forward anyway.
Yeah. And I think part of it too is even the way we're programmed in church, how, this is bad and this is good. And so if it's good, it must be God. And if it's bad, it must be the devil. And it's this polarization of things instead of understanding that the tactics of the enemy, he knows uh, the Satanist stuff, and the hardcore stuff. Nobody's, unless you have a draw or tie in or, whatever to that, most people are not going to be deceived by that. But
Hmm.
the light side of the system becomes such a deception because they don't mind doing good in the midst of it. So, like even with
Right.
Q, is it did wake a lot of people up to things. And, one of my housemates actually was part of her journey in finding the Lord. And
Mm.
so, it had some good to it and it had
Yeah,
some
that's good.
good to it. And
Uh,
so this is the kind of thing. But when we read in scripture, when Jesus said, there will be those who, are healing in my name and casting out demons in my name and doing all these wonderful things in my name. And he's going to say, I don't know you. And
right.
this is where the tricky part comes in is the enemy is so much more shrewd and wise than, the majority of Christians are asleep to understanding how he works and how he functions. And I believe as a church, we do need to wake up to this stuff, not in fear mongering, but to go, Christ already won the victory. Jesus won the victory. And he
Hmm.
has a way through that he wants us to partner with, that this whole system can come down and needs to come down and will come down, I believe. Uh,
I know. Yeah.
And the Lord wants to partner with us in that. He invites us into the process, but we have to wake up to be aware of what's going on this journey. Um,
I I wrote that post about yoga that just really blew things up in many. I lost a lot of people following me. I got a lot of nasty messages. Well, my
yeah,
church does yoga and I don't think there's anything bad about it. And um I think about that when I think, about churches that don't tell their general membership, hey, there are things that you really can't do without being out of favor with God, or at least, if not out of favor, being much more susceptible to the wiles of the devil, yoga being one of them,
yeah,
uh, tarot being another.
yep,
I know a lot of people who identify as Christians who do not think there's anything wrong with tarot cards or runes or, kind of that other casting of, whether it's cards or blocks or you name it to divine something. Pendulums.
yeah, yeah,
There's a lot of that kind of stuff. The new agey sort of thing that
yep,
um, even what I was talking to you a little bit about before the show, psychic readings and astrology and all these things that aren't necessarily God driven. And not just that, but they are a fundamental part of the occult. And if you
yeah,
start dabbling in them, you're going to tap into the demons attached to the tarot cards.
yeah.
And you're going to tap into that energy that is created by the occult using this stuff all the time. Have you ever heard of, I read something, I think it was by John Todd, that tarot cards sometimes are used just as an excuse, like to have something to play in front of people, when in reality, what they're really doing is just connecting with a demon spirit to tell them things to tell
Yes.
the client. You've heard that.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely. Yes. I'm in agreement with that. And was recently listening to someone who came out of the cult and the tarot card reading and psychic stuff. And she confirmed that as well. And it's one of those things where if you understand how through trauma, um, that occult ability, psychic ability is opened up. Now, the challenge of it is that it opens you up to, what some people call the second heaven. And you can get a lot of good information there. The enemy knows a lot of true and good information. And I believe that this is infiltrated the church in, the prophetic movement and type of things, is that a lot of those even high level prophets may actually be mind control trauma survivors. And so I think I've shared, before that it has to do with the sodomy between, I think, 3 and 5, damages the spinal cord, opens the third eye, induces amnesia, as part of that fragmenting, and how mystics were made, in the Catholic Church. And, some people ooh and ah over these mystics and all of the things that they know and the signs that they can do. And yet I personally believe a lot of it is not from the true Lord Jesus, but from a counterfeit source.
Hmm. I read recently in um, Svali's book, It's Not Impossible, Healing from Ritual Abuse and Mind Control, that that the Jesuits deliberately rape their children in the womb. She said they use this Q-tip-like device and they watch to see which infants survive and which don't from this particular experience. So, and that ties into me thinking about all the survivors that they say this is a gift. This psychic ability is a gift from God. I have had it from birth.
Yeah,
And I'm thinking, no, I think it's trauma based.
it is.
I think that it's a result of boundary violations. And if you have enough of those, whether that's a physical trauma or an emotional trauma or whatever, when you stop having boundaries, that's when all the information can flow through to you. We call it psychic, but it's damage. It's really just some form of being early, damaged early, whether that's in the womb or just after birth. I don't think we have that kind of stuff if we're healthy, nurtured, well cared for infants and children. I don't think you're naturally quote unquote psychic from birth, if you've got a good upbringing.
Definitely. And in the church, it's often your intercessors who consider themselves empathic and can feel, sense, see everybody's stuff. And
Hmm.
then, they're carrying that burden and that weight. Uh, and oftentimes, like you said, they see it as a gift and they think it's from the
Yeah,
Lord.
yeah,
And yet, when you see the fruit of it, oftentimes they're burdened down or they can't go out in public because they feel overwhelmed by everyone. And it's like, I don't think that's Jesus's way. He said his yoke is easy and his burden is light.
yeah,
And I believe it is from trauma, but it's hard for people to be able to receive that because of that. It's a gift type of thing.
right. It's a gift mentality that really blinds some, I think, not all, but some, to the fact that they've got healing to do and they're not okay yet.
And so it takes some time for people to be able to shift to realize, okay, there's something deeper that I need to address, because I believe that there is a truth that God can give us impressions of what's going on in other people, but it's in the right timing, it's the right way. It's not feeling everybody's stuff. And I believe that's the difference. I do believe there is a true prophetic gift that is beautiful and holy and
Yeah,
anointed and needed.
yeah.
But a lot of what we see out there right now, I believe, is coming from second heaven stuff.
It's counterfeit. Yeah. I tend to think the same thing. This way of psychic hearing or psychic divining or getting information is vastly different, in my experience anyway, from what you talked about last weekend in your Hearing God seminar. You did a Hearing God seminar on Saturday, and it was well attended, and people thought it was absolutely wonderful, and they got a lot out of it. And the reason I came is because I've always heard from God in a very different way. And I'm curious if anybody else has ever, I was curious if anybody else ever heard from God in the same way, and they didn't. So that was interesting to me. Um, but differentiating between hearing from God and having psychic information, you're going to feel that differently from what I guess, and you're going to experience it differently. And I would also guess it's going to be a very different quality of information.
Yeah.
Um, so. It's important, I think, especially in this day and age, that we're not running off to people to get better information than we run towards God to get the best information.
Yes,
I think
definitely.
that's what a lot of people, we're also kind of up in the air. The political climate and the economic climate's all weird, and everything's in kind of a shift and a change, and we all feel it. I
Yeah.
think anybody that doesn't feel it is probably not paying attention to what's going on in the world. I'm jealous of them a little bit. Um, but we all feel it. And I think a lot of people, they run to the television, they run to social media, they
Yes.
run to other individuals, they run to people who they've elevated as gurus in their own mind for information about XYZ. They ask questions of inappropriate people
Yeah.
instead of going straight to God.
Yep.
You can go straight to God about just about anything. You can
Yes.
go
And he
straight to
wants
God
us to.
about, yeah, what to eat for dinner, which I have to do frequently because I have some issues that make eating a challenge at times. And I'm allergic to a lot of the chemicals that they put on food. So if I don't ask what to eat, I get, and I just decide for myself. Sometimes I get really hammered. We can ask about whether to go out driving at a certain time or when to leave. I mean, there's infinite number of things you can ask about. You have to decide, I guess, for yourself where you draw your own line because you live on Earth successfully, I don't think, having to specifically ask about every minute detail in
Yeah.
your life, but you definitely can ask about the big things that you're confused about. I think most people forget to do that.
Hmm.
Should I do this? Should I do that? Do you have it? And it doesn't take long if you're connected to God, which I can't say is a short process, wasn't a short process for me to learn how I best connect and how I best hear God answer me. But but it is possible to do. So instead of going to Q, instead of going to
Yes,
social media, instead of going to all of these, the Brotherhood's got it in the bag because we all go somewhere else for information, whether that's astrology or tarot or XYZ. We're all looking for things, and a lot of people are just looking for them in the wrong places.
definitely. And that's what I would say about that hearing God for our daily life is they want to do life relationally with us. I believe if we're doing it kind of like a Ouija board or tarot cards where we're trying to get the right answer, that's where it's a problem. But he cares so much about us. And so I love, how you asking about food and different things like that, because he cares about you and wants you to feel good. And
Yeah.
so he's able to do that. The other extreme is when we lived in California, there was a woman who came to us and she was sharing about her son and daughter, and they'd gone so radically in this, we can't do anything until we hear from God, that they just sat at home, didn't
Yeah.
work. She took care of them. She went to work. She would come home, cook meals for them, clean the house, and they would just sit there
Wow.
until God told them to do something and they do it. And, it was so religious and pious. It's like, no,
Wow.
that's not it.
Mm-mm. No, it's definitely a balance, and knowing where that is going to be different, I imagine, for every different, every person has their own level of needing to go to God for answers for different things. And God's going to sometimes answer us and sometimes not.
Yeah.
So waiting around forever for an answer that may not come because he just wants you to do something
Mhm.
and not sit around forever is a good thing. I think opening a channel of communication, just saying, here's the things I want to hear from you and regularly, and I'm not going to ask for these things. I just want them to flow through me. I want your answers to precede my actions. You can also do that. I do that a lot.
Yeah.
I want your answers to precede my actions because I need this guidance on a regular basis. That's another way to do it. Um, a lot of people ask me about celebrities and stars, and I'm like, I can't follow that stuff anymore. I can't follow other people because to me it ties in a little bit to the idolatry
Mhm.
sections in the Bible. And, I can't make those people idols and focus on what God wants me to do at the same time.
Yeah.
I can't follow where they are and who their kids are and what their kids are dressed like and this and that and the other. And I think a lot of people have gotten into that habit
Mhm.
of following a lot of other people, but we've only got so much time in the day. At least I do. I don't know about everybody else, but my day keeps getting shorter and shorter all the time. So we gotta choose what we follow. No, so I don't choose to follow Q. I don't choose to do,
Mhm.
you know, a lot of the tarot and astrology and whatnot because it's fruitful sometimes in the short run. That's the catch, right?
Yes. The
Sometimes it's
deception.
fruitful in the short run. It's like a hook.
Mhm.
And then once you're in, then it drags you down under the water
Yeah.
and tries to drown you.
Yeah. And at least in one of um, my other housemates, his system had a full deck of tarot cards embedded
Um,
in and connected with entities and so on. And we don't need to be afraid of these things because, again, the true Lord Jesus has a way through. And in the process has, ways for restoration and healing that are beyond what we can ask or think. And so I just want to encourage people if you're discovering these things, not to freak out. I mean, I still freak out with things, so I get it. We just do, but at the same time, to
yeah,
know that there is a safe place and there is a way through, that we don't have to be afraid of these things, but we get to walk it out with the Lord. So,
yeah, exactly. Well, you sparked my interest about different levels of tarot cards in the system. Maybe I'll have to look that up and see what I can find in the whistleblower information that I've gotten. I'm always hunting for new things to write about, so maybe that'll
yeah,
be a good one. Mm,
so many devious ways that they use. And my understanding is the Kabbalah tree and those tarot cards sometimes are so foundational level that we don't remember it because I've I'm not aware of any of it yet until now, you know, this is coming up. But
Right.
you know, it's a journey of layer by layer, discovering what's there and how the Lord wants to clean up, work through, and restore. Kind of back on the DID area, I think that might be helpful in understanding a little bit better the way it, you know, had been explained to me and the way I've mostly taught it is that, you know, in those early years we're able to fragment, and that's why mind control has to be below 6 years old. But recently came across some things from Joe Getzinger about DID, and she has some notations of some scientific backup of it, that it's actually when we are born, our personality and our mind is not fully formed and our identity is not fully formed. And that it's through interaction with mom and dad family that that is developed in those early years. And so it's not, here's my mind and it's already formed and something breaks off of it, but it's more that in an unformed mind, when trauma happens, it, you know, segments off and isn't able to continue the development and the cohesion to come together as a whole.
Hmm.
And so I thought that was an interesting
That makes
perspective
sense.
that I'm still processing. And but I think it helps people understand why and what happens. And I personally believe that everybody has experienced some form of trauma.
Yeah.
Being born in the Western world with the way that we do birth is
Yeah.
traumatic. And so there's opportunities for that to happen in people who are not mind controlled. And so there's this whole spectrum of fragmentation that everybody experiences. And that DID is not really a mental disorder, but it's actually how we cope
Yeah.
and respond to trauma. And so,
Without it, I don't think people would be surviving as an infant.
no,
It's a
no.
survival tactic, yeah, of the brain.
And I think that helps to take the stigma off instead of like, I'm crazy, I've got this metal thing and I'm all split and fragmented and all of those kinds of things, which I think is kind of freaky and freaks people out.
Yeah,
Um,
I think so. I was discussing dissociation with somebody, and uh, they were adamant that they've never dissociated in their life, and it really is a spectrum. It's a wide, it seems to be a wide spectrum that they've sort of put artificial dividing levels on just to kind of get a handle on severity, I suppose,
yeah,
from mild but everybody dissociates, I think.
yeah, yeah,
Even if they call the lower levels of dissociation like highway hypnosis or
yes,
imagination.
yes,
So, you daydream, that's another form of dissociation. You're looking out the window in school, everybody's done it. You
yeah,
don't, your mind wanders, that's dissociation to a very mild extent. You drive however far on the freeway or on a highway somewhere and you can't remember, the past quarter mile, that's dissociation. So we all do it. It's
yeah.
not it's part of how our brain operates, I think, to be able to. I'm kind of convinced at this point that imagination is our brain operating on a different dimensional level, whether
Mhm.
that's in a heavenly realm or not. I don't really know,
Yeah.
but I think that's a possibility, that imagination is a closer way of connecting with God and different than 3D reality, because you do kind of have to be out of your physical self to be in a really good imaginative state.
Mhm.
But yeah, we all everybody dissociates. It's to the degree that I think it messes with your life when
Yes.
it starts to get problematic, when it prevents you from knowing who you are,
Yeah.
when it prevents you from experiencing your entire life, when you blank out for long periods of time and can't figure out what you just did, or people, you know, tell you did something, you're like, what? A lot
Yes.
of people that you start having, those freak out moments like, what is my body doing? And that's
Yeah.
when you want to work towards bringing yourself more together, your brain more together. But yeah, it's a
Yeah.
horrible way. I think it's a horrible way that it's been presented to the public,
Mhm.
because it's presented as um, as an it's kind of a sideshow. It's almost like a
Yes.
circus thing. You know,
Yes.
they parade out individuals like this, like Sybil, for example, and they make you think like, well, everybody who's got this is exactly like this woman, all these distinct personality parts and distinct switching and distinct, vocabulary or ages or ways of dressing or how, they present it as something that's almost a circus freak show, sideshow. And I think actually from what I've seen in general, that's kind of an anomaly in terms of DID or
Yeah.
dissociation. That's almost a very small percentage of really extreme cases whereas even most people who have been severely tortured don't really, they don't look like that, present like that, or have that appear in their life. So they've done all of us a disservice who are trying to understand it by
Yeah.
putting out this information. Like, you look it up online and you're not going to get the truth out of that.
Yes.
You're going to get something much more extreme and much more concrete and much more, for certain than I think it actually is. I think it's
Yeah.
much more fluid, and most people, they're going to express it very differently because we're all different and we're all
We
made
are.
different. We all break differently and we all react differently and we all, um, different traumas just hit different people differently. I think that's one thing that's hopefully a good thing for many people to learn, is that they don't have to fit in that box
Yes.
to claim it and therefore heal from it. You have to claim it in order to heal from it. If you don't claim it, you're never going to heal from it.
It's very true. And I believe that the more that we can normalize the understanding of this, the more um, we can work through practically how to heal from it. Now, there's extremes because there's people who take it and um, make it a lifestyle, if that makes sense, and don't really want to heal. And
Right.
that's not helpful either. I think a lot of the um, mental health issues out there, such as, bipolar and autism on the spectrum, is connected to dissociation and fragmentation. And uh, medication may be needed in some cases, but also therapeutic models of healing can, I believe, drastically improve those cases
Yeah.
to live a normal life. But you have either that suppressing, no, we're not going to do anything, no, we're not going to claim it, no, we're just going to
Yep.
pretend, to over
Yep.
here where, oh, we're just going to embrace it as a new lifestyle.
Yeah.
Um, and so a lot of the neurodivergent stuff that's out there now is like, we're going to celebrate that as a lifestyle instead of looking at,
Uh,
there
right.
are, I believe, solutions to a lot of it. So,
I think that's part of the problem when as a community, as a therapeutic community, you ignore the reality, then people are going to find a way to adjust so that they don't have so much cognitive dissonance or
yeah,
discomfort in their life. They're going to say, well, if you're not going to help me heal, I'm just going to embrace it because that's the only other thing I can do to make my life not so miserable. Because either way it's going to be miserable, but the cognitive dissonance goes away. Like, if you can't find a helping person to help, and let me say, finding anybody to help heal from DID is a big task these days. There are not a lot of qualified or competent people out there who know the things to do to help you heal. I think somewhere else in Fiona's book, she wrote, like, Australia's a wasteland, don't even bother looking. You're
mm,
not going to find anybody, which I hope is not completely true, but I
right,
appreciate the sentiment.
yeah,
It must feel like that trying to find someone. But even in the United States, I've seen a lot of people, some people have asked, and it's really, really difficult to recommend anybody because they're either really closed mouth about it because it's such a problematic issue in
mhm,
their own field,
mhm,
or yeah, it just aren't a lot of people who want to go that direction because it's
yeah,
a challenge. It's a
yeah.
lot of work. It's a lot of work working with people.
It
Yeah.
is, and I'm so grateful for the prayer minister that I work with. Joe Getzinger is amazing. We just did a testimony mountain on relational healing that I believe really has a lot of keys to this healing journey, and a lot of what we do in transformations is helping people. Um, and it's not an easy pathway, and I
Yeah.
part of the looking at the DID to me from a Christian perspective, this is sometimes challenging because people will bring up the verse in James, a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways, and he's not going to
Mm,
receive anything from the Lord, and
mm,
so it
yeah.
makes it feel like, oh, I'm in trouble. God doesn't like me. He's not going to help me. And it's not true. I believe the Bible portions of it are directed to specific people groups. And when we take all of it and apply it to ourselves, like, Jesus saying, woe to you, Pharisees, because you do this, 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 and this.
Hmm.
Well, if I apply that to my life and go, oh my goodness, God's after me, he's mad at me, I'm
Right.
not doing things right, when I'm doing the best I know, that it doesn't work.
No, it doesn't.
But I
That's
believe,
the point. That's
yeah,
the point at which you say, "Hey, God, does this apply to me right now? Does this
yes,
verse apply to me right now? Do I have to pay attention to this, or can I move along with life and give me a better verse? Lead me to something that will help me."
yeah.
Yeah.
And I believe personally that as we are yielded to the Lord, is that He covers that. That's His grace. And so
Right.
I can face the reality that in Him I am whole and complete. That is true.
Mhm.
And I'm on my journey. And I've got a lot of fragmentation left that I'm working through.
Yeah.
And we're doing this together. And He covers me in that. And so that helps me not to be discouraged, like I'm so broken. It's Humpty Dumpty type of situation. Nobody can put me back together. That's hopeless despair in that place. But in Christ, there is the solutions for everything that we face.
When I was a kid, nobody ever said, and I went to church a lot when I was a child, but nobody ever said, God, there's a hymn, God will take care of you. But that concept was never provided, ever. And it took me decades to realize that that's what he's there for.
Yeah, He is. And He doesn't let us down. I mean, He has been there through it all. And often the reason we don't see Him doing things is because we're trying to do it ourselves. And sometimes He'll say that to me. They're
Yeah,
like, we want to help you, but if we don't force you, we're not
right.
like the cult. And so if you're determined to do it yourself, we're going to stand here and we're going to love you right where you're at.
Yeah,
But we can't do much in your life while you've got those walls up. And so
exactly.
that's a lot of the challenge, is letting them in and learning
Yeah.
to trust.
Getting over the fear. I think fear is a lot of it. And that's why, what is it, 300, 400, 600? I can't remember the number of times the Bible says, don't
Yeah.
fear, because that's the barrier.
Mhm.
That's one of the barriers, but it's a huge barrier to letting God help us and
Yeah.
letting in, yeah, letting it in. You do a lot of that, I think. So your book is coming out in a couple of days, and
Yes.
and I'm excited to read it. I hope I get to figure out how to get a copy.
I'll
Um,
get some to you.
and you said something during the seminar last week, and that I thought was interesting. You said that you share your journal with someone else, and that they go through it. And I went through a period of writing a journal too, but I never was courageous enough to share it with anybody. So tell me what that is experience is like. It's got to be, there's got to be some, or maybe there isn't. I don't know, trepidation in sharing your innermost feelings with someone else.
There is, in fact, I just sent my journaling to Joe this morning and I had a little bit of a struggle with it. Fortunately, we've worked long enough that there's enough trust built that I'm able to do that. Uh,
Mm,
I would say that, like in my journey, I started out as a Christian who had to be perfect and could never be wrong, could never have anything revealed that I did bad. And again, that was that cover up and the walls. And I'm so grateful to have had a pastor in my life who was vulnerable from the pulpit, which was so strange.
Yeah.
Uh, and it began modeling this pathway to being able to be vulnerable. And I believe that our healing journey requires that radical vulnerability. Now, there's places where it's not safe to do that. I early on, I shared with my kids and my husband at the time, and that freaked them out. They weren't on the same page. They weren't able to handle that, and so
Oh,
there's definite places where I don't share. But
right.
in my community and in my groups, I share what's going on in my life. I'm not this perfect person who facilitates these groups and I've got it all together, but I share my vulnerabilities too. And I really believe it helps others to open up and for us to walk out this journey together, going, you're not alone. I have felt that too. And
Right.
being validated in the journey so helps. And then we can move on to healing when we don't feel heard and validated, then it isn't there. Um, and so it takes some time to work through those things to be able to be vulnerable, particularly when we've been so deeply wounded and betrayed. And
Hmm.
I have been betrayed by a lot of women,
Yeah, I
and that's
bet.
probably one of my biggest fears and struggles. And I've been able to put that in journaling and wrestle through that with Joe.
Hmm.
And she's been faithful and steady. And that is helping me to build that. What we need
Trust.
is secure attachment in life
Right.
so that we can heal. Um, so
Can you give an example? Because I'm curious, of one really helpful piece of feedback that you got from her when you gave her your journal that you didn't expect, maybe something something that she said or was able to provide for you that that kind of leap jump started or helped you leapfrog over a difficult challenge, maybe?
what I would say is the majority, like she doesn't go through my journaling and say this, and this. Um,
Hmm.
and she does not give a whole lot of feedback unless I ask for it.
Okay.
So if I ask for a specific issue, what do you think about this? Or what's going on here? Or sometimes she will say, that is part of this programming, and then we can talk and work through it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for me, the biggest thing is just validation of her reading it and affirming you are hearing from the Lord. This is consistent with scripture. It's consistent, through the whole time that she's known me.
Hmm.
Um, and that probably has been one of the biggest value to that. And then there's a lot that the other value in her reading the journaling is there's things that I would not be able to share in person. And even interpersonally, where parts of mine are going, we hate Joe. I could never sit across from her and go, my parts are saying we hate you,
Right.
or or even saying I hate you, those types of things. And so the journaling is an opportunity for me to be able to share what I'm feeling, what parts are saying,
Mm.
and resolution from the Lord, um, so that we're able to do a lot. So, like in a normal situation where you go once a week or something to a counseling session or something, you work on basically one thing, and that's
Hmm.
great. But the reality is, the survivors, we're facing,
Yeah.
daily a list of things that are coming up, that's popping up and going off. And so when I come to a session, there's probably, 7 to 8 to 10 things we could,
Yeah.
work on. Um, but a lot of it is resolved in the journaling enough that I can continue my life, and the Lord will highlight the one thing that we need to focus on that day. And
Hmm.
so it just helps that she knows all of this
Yeah.
that's going
Brunt
on.
of it. Yeah.
Um, I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. It sounds like it's a really important adjunct um to meeting in person,
Yeah.
which it's good to have that. Really good to have. I think you're very brave for releasing. I mean, because as I understand it, these parts of this journaling are what you put together as your book. So releasing this publicly, that's a brave hurdle. Congratulations and
Well,
brava.
thank you. It's very scary.
I bet. I
Um,
bet.
I've had my moments, but I, the target audience is not a general audience. Most people, this would not be anything that they, could or should read. But I, particularly for survivors to understand, and to be able to relate, because it's this thing you can read somebody's book of their story and you can get details and facts, but what you don't see is the struggle and the wrestle
Yeah.
and I don't want to live. People might
Right.
see me on Testimony Mountain and go, you're always cheerful and everything's great for you.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, no. I go through times of deep wrestling with the Lord,
Yeah.
when, different kinds of programming surface and different parts are sharing memories or something. And so I hope this will help survivors of complex trauma to be validated and to go, there is hope. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, great. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to reading it and
thank you.
pulling out pertinent pieces and writing about it too, which I know probably freaks you out, but
No, it's
oh
okay.
well.
It's okay. Well, thank you, Veronica, so much for being on today. I so appreciate you. And just thank
Likewise.
you. And for those of you who are listening, thank you for participating today. Encourage you to like, subscribe, and share. Share this with someone whom this might be an important piece of the puzzle. And so we
Yeah.
will see you next time on Testimony Mountain.